Hey guys, Steve Seymour here with the Investors Agent Podcast. Today we have Crystal Foster on. Crystal, thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I always like to dive right in and find out what got you into real estate.
So I spent 12 years, I guess, in corporate banking, doing sales, and we had a lot of mergers. And after every merger, positions were eliminated. And after the last merger, I had a client come in and actually offer me a position with her brokerage to come be her assistant / operations manager.
So you got scalped.
I did. And it was at the point where I was like, I just was looking for something new. And it was a really exciting opportunity. And after going to work with her for a couple of years, I really just fell in love with real estate in the industry. So I worked on the agent side for a little bit as a real estate agent. I worked with a real estate team. I worked in operations in the brokerage.
And how long ago was this? What year did you get in?
8 years ago.
8 years? Okay.
Yeah. So 3 years I worked with the brokerage, and then it's been almost 5 years working on the sales side and the investor side.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of lead right into that because you're moving quick. But with the investor side, I think that, should I assume that that's more of your passion and the direction that you want to head?
It is, yes.
Tell me why.
I mean, for a couple of reasons. I really like how every day is different. Something that I've kind of self-discovered in the last couple of years is that I really, really love challenges and solving problems. And I also really enjoy helping people. I get to do both of those things through real estate investing. So it's been about 3 years since I had my first opportunity, and it was super exciting to get to go in and help get a building to be stabilized. We help the tenants by getting out a lot of people who are causing issues, and then help the owner by making it profitable. So it was a great time.
That's awesome. You got to find something that you're passionate about, helping people and problem solving, combine the two, and then actually create value and get paid for it.
Yes.
Not a lot of people get that opportunity, and they're in
Very
JOBs
lucky.
that are not fulfilling and not very profitable either.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like kind of sets you apart from other people who have attempted to get into investing but never really taken the step? Because I think I always like to try to give people tidbits. I think the hardest thing in anything, like going to the gym, is getting started.
Yep.
Same thing with real estate investing. What separated you from people that have been on the fence and you're able to get started in it?
Probably a couple things. I had a coach, so I invest a lot in my education. The coach is great for accountability and accountability towards my goals and things that I say I want to do, and actually taking action steps towards doing them. And then also just educating myself. I think it's a lot to do with who you align yourself with. So I aligned with a partner who is also very aggressive, so that helps push me.
I've had these conversations so many times, and it's like the same thing every time. It's either a coach, mentor, or the people.
Yep, a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to hear it because I didn't know that, but I assume it's a similar story as most of the conversations that I have. With your partnership, can you share anything about any tips on going into partnership and what that looks like? Because partnerships can be great, they can be really ugly, and they can be all everywhere in between.
Yeah. So my brain naturally goes to the operations side, and I'm very pessimistic and always looking at what could go wrong. So going into a partnership, I think it's really important to always have the conversation up front, like what happens when or if this doesn't work.
The dissolution.
Yeah, because things change, right?
Yeah.
It could be people's goals change, people's lives change. So when you have that conversation up front, I think that it makes it a lot easier. Being open, having someone who has similar goals or similar motivation is also very important. So with all of the partnerships that I have now, we've had those exit conversations up front, and we document it and put it in writing in our operating agreements so that if something doesn't work, we agreed on this when we started.
Yeah, one of my mentors, who I think is very wise, has talked to me about that, because I'm always like, looking at the positive. I'm like, let's go do this. And you get excited and you're like, yeah, we could do it together and it's gonna be great and it's all gonna work out. And you're like, pump the brakes. Let's see, worst case scenario, what if this happens? Look at the downside. And that's a much more logical, intelligent way to go about partnerships. You kind of need both of them though, right? Because if you don't have the benefit of doing it, then what's the point?
Right.
So you have to see the upside of partnering and then also see the potential risks, pitfalls, and just mitigate them.
Yeah. I think it's also important to have conversations with the people you're partnering with to be in alignment with what the goal is. So like the person I partner with primarily, we are very motivated by the same things. So we're motivated by helping people. We're motivated by goals. We're very driven by bottom line. And we've worked with and partnered with other people who value time off, for example. And so when things get really hard and we're running really hard, if that person, there's nothing wrong with that, that's what they value. It's just not the same. So there was friction. So I think it's important to have those conversations up front too, and partner with people who are good at things that are different than you're good at, but in alignment with like the underlying values.
That makes a ton of sense. Do you have any tips about how to figure out values, alignment, similar goals?
Yeah. So we have extensive conversations with everyone that we hire, work with, partner with. We use a Disc Plus that has like a values assessment, which is a great starting point, and then sit down and have what I would consider to be extensive conversation around it.
And a Disc Plus is a personality profile for assessing.
Yes. Yeah. So it assesses personality, but then it also assesses like your underlying, what you value as important. So something like time off or something as being seen as an individual versus a group. And then we just talk about it. I think at this point too, like I have no problem just being honest and upfront with people and saying like, this is what I find important. This is how I think I could bring value to you. This is how I think you could bring value to us, and see if it's a good fit. And if it doesn't work out, it's no hard feelings.
Oh yeah. You're just being proactive in getting clarity and making sure that everyone's not wasting their time.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I find that to be extremely helpful. And we've implemented some things like that in our business as well. One thing with you being on the operations side, because that's a really weak point for me in my mental makeup, but for anyone out there who maybe is on the operational side or is struggling with it, where would you say you guys have had the most success with creating operations to have things run seamlessly? And I know that it comes natural to some people, right?
Yeah.
I know it's a very broad question.
Yeah, no. So it's interesting. So
before, I didn't even know what operations was. So I guess I kind of starting there. It's like, what is that? What does that look like?
So it's interesting because for the 12 years I was in banking, I was in sales. So we door knocked like small business owners. I had loan goals and all of that. So then taking like a hard turn and moving to operations at first was a little like, oh. But I think, like, I don't know if I can think of a specific thing, but overall in all of our businesses now, like I really enjoy building it. When you take a little bit of time to set up some systems and document them, it's a really fun problem to solve. And then you can hire someone else who might not necessarily be able to figure out how the problem is, but is really, really good at following a system, a checklist, a process. So in everything that we do, no matter if it's in real estate sales, in our investing, how we manage the properties that we own, we put a plan in place of like, this is a process and the most efficient way to do this. Then we document it. I make videos, I do tutorials, and then we hire a person to actually execute that. And we've seen a lot of success with that.
Yeah. So, really what I'm hearing is just create some sort of written process, and it's mainly coming from a place of efficiency and duplication, right?
Yes.
So that you don't have to continually reinvent the wheel every time.
Right.
Taking the thought process out of specific tasks for others to follow. Yeah. It's something that I think it's essential for every single business.
Oh yeah.
And most of the time, salespeople are not wired for operations.
I know. So here's the other thing too. So I really enjoy bridging the gap between like the stereotypical shiny object salesperson and in the box black and white operations person. So what I've found to be helpful, what I get a lot of joy out of is bridging that gap and then putting a system in place that's still personal. So just because there's a process in place for something doesn't mean that it has to be super checklisty, 1, 2, 3. We can't have any type of variation to be people, right? All of our businesses are people to people. It's all about the people. So being able to put a process in place to say, like, here's your guidance and guidelines, you have to follow this. It's not, if you miss step number 2 because number 3 makes sense to go first, like that's okay. And having the conversations to help people be understanding of, just because I missed this checklist doesn't mean I didn't do it right. Like sometimes there's more than one way, but when we have that guidance and put that time up front, it saves us all a lot of time, energy, and money on the back end.
And that's what helped you scale a really successful real estate team, right? And now with your shift in focus in the investing side, where do your strengths lie in that in terms of, obviously it's kind of like you overlay the same strengths. And I know you say helping people and, what was, sorry, helping people. And what was the second?
I love helping people and solving problems.
Solving problems, right.
Yeah. Like building things in general is really fun.
Yeah. So how are you applying that to investing?
So what we've become really good at very quickly is finding like tired landlords, dilapidated buildings, apartments, single family duplex, everything in between. And going in there and putting in the renovations. So we own buildings everywhere from D class to B, garden style, right? So you have very different tenants in those buildings and they want different things. So being able to kind of say like this type of building, this is what we're going to do. This is our finishes. This is the money that we put in, underwriting it up front and having a plan is what I'm really finding that is helping. So we have this very similar checklist for every building. And then we can just tweak the finishes depending on the target. And
what is your typical buy box? Are you buying multifamily?
Yeah. So we're all over the place. So we joke like we have a circle. We try to stay in the circle, but sometimes if it makes sense outside. So the one buy box, we don't really go outside of 10 miles of Pottstown.
Okay.
So we want to drive, we want to feel it, touch it, see it. The way that our business works, like we're very vertically integrated. So we have a property manager who manages all the units that we keep. We have an in-house construction team that manages and oversees all the renovations. I am the project manager for most of the projects. So I want to be able to drive there, see it.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we flip some single families. We flip some duplexes and triplexes. And then we buy multifamily to hold also. So we have some different goals for each bucket, and each one of those things fulfills a different goal for the year.
Versus maybe short-term income, long-term income.
Yep. Yeah. Have some capital to help fund some of the projects and then keep the buildings for appreciation cash flow.
It's a fun mess. It's a fun problem to solve, right?
It is.
And definitely not the same thing every day. It's different every day.
Every day. I just walked through a building that we bought yesterday. I walked through this morning. I had not seen it yet, and it's going to be a fun one. So
more problems, right?
Yeah.
To solve.
Yes.
That's what you wanted.
That's what I like. Yeah.
Be careful what you ask for. No,
plenty of them. Yeah.
Typically, if you solve bigger problems, you get paid more.
This is true.
With that, what are some of the biggest problems and challenges that you've encountered that you've been able to overcome?
People.
People.
It's always people. Yeah.
Always people.
When you have really, really good people around you, you can go a lot faster. Finding the right people can be challenging.
Let's get an example. We don't need to say any names. We're not going to trash anyone. But is it a contractor?
We've had problems with contractors. That's why we have in-house construction now. We've had problems with property managers. That's why we just hired a person to manage our properties for us.
Every vertical integration was a person or a problem.
It's true, though. Yes. I mean, you can go through any type of interview process, whether it's a subcontractor or someone you're putting on W-2 payroll. And at the end of the day, you can screen for whatever you want, but it's really hard to screen for when they show up. Like people can BS you in an interview. You can ask all the questions, do any assessment you want. And at the end of the day, within the first couple of days of showing up for work, like you'll know if it's going to be a fit or not.
Yeah. So do you mind sharing an example?
I don't.
People love stories.
Okay. We have all kinds of stories. We've gone through a lot of people and it's really hard. I think some of our biggest, I don't even want to say mistakes because you learn from everything.
Exactly.
But
that's why we want them to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. Yes. Learn from all of them. I mean, our biggest hurdle is really holding on to people too long, right? So we like people. We want to help people. We see the potential in people that they don't see or maybe don't want to. Yeah.
It's like a bad relationship. You stay in too long. You're like,
it happens more often than I'd like to admit. But yeah, I mean, we had one person who we probably kept her for 9 months longer than we should have. And she was not doing her job, but she was doing a couple things that were really annoying to me that I didn't have to deal with. So I kept covering for her in her other roles because I'm like, oh, but she's doing this stuff and it's so helpful. And at the end of the day, like when we did have to release her, like we just uncovered so much other stuff it was like the gift that kept giving. And, had we made that move 9 months earlier, we really probably knew a year earlier. She was here for a little over a year. It would
so
have
how many chances should you give someone, right? It's like, because no one's perfect.
No.
Except for me. No,
Yeah.
not even close.
Right? We all think we are. No. I like to give people at least 3 chances.
Yeah.
The first time is really more of a teaching opportunity. The second time is more of like a documented, hey, like we talked about this, remember, can you help me understand what's happening? Or like, is there...
Yeah.
And then the third time is kind of like...
This is the final straw.
Like, I'm not really asking you anymore. Like, I'm telling you, and
this is the
I don't want to
ultimatum.
be like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they are tough conversations to have, and it's a tough part of the business.
Yeah.
Any tips for people dealing with people and hard conversations specifically?
Yeah. So I do them a lot. That's one of the things that I don't enjoy doing, but I'm good at doing. I mean, I try to take the emotions out of it. And at the end of the day, when you're holding on to someone longer and they're not performing, you're hurting yourself and them, because there's another role out there that is a great fit for that person. And when you're keeping them here and it's constantly running into the wall, that's not good for either one of you. They don't feel good either.
Issue, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just trying to keep the bigger picture in mind, take the emotion out of it, realize that it is a win-win.
Yeah.
Even though it's a lose-lose, you're losing each other, but it's a win-win in a sense, because there's got to be something better for them if they're not really performing in their role.
Yep.
Yeah. It's hard to know sometimes what a business needs specifically, and a little bit of trial and error as a small business owner, and having clearly defined roles really helps. You said you had a mentor and guide. Did you lean on different people for advice in terms of hiring and firing?
Yes, some of it. I mean, coaches are great for the accountability because they know what's going on and they don't know the people usually who are working there. So it's easy for them to be like, here's your metric and they're not meeting it. You need to let them go. But I mean, some of it's trial and error. I've been in a leadership or manager role since I was 19. So if you would ask my young 20 self if I could have those conversations, probably not.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, unfortunately, like I've just had a lot of those conversations. So
you had some experience built into your previous career that you were able to overlay onto your real estate business. That's very helpful.
Yes.
We use EOS, which helps, but there's lots of different systems out there.
Yep.
EOS is not just about hiring and firing, but that's one component of the 6 key components for it. For anyone that's out there in this, if this is resonating with you and you're having people issues,
yes,
EOS does have some tools for that.
Yes. EOS is also good for when you're trying to figure out what the next hire needs to be, to figure out in your box, like what you're doing and where you're spending time.
Yeah. With like an accountability chart or an functional organizational chart in terms of knowing what the business needs. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying with the goals, right?
Yes.
You have to have alignment in the goals from the leadership level. Yep. And then that can trickle down and then you figure out, okay, what do we need to get there?
Yes. Yep.
Who do we need to get there?
Exactly. Yep.
with investing, what do you feel like is the biggest thing that you run into with other people? Because I'm sure you have people reaching out to you about getting into investing, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest BS excuse that they use all the time? Like the story you hear all the time that it just becomes old.
I mean, that they're scared. Some people will just tell you that, which is nice. But money.
Yeah.
A lot of people when we talk, so we do a monthly meetup to try to help bring different guests in. So it's not always me help answering or my partner answering, but a lot of times when I hear people say like, I found this deal or I found this or I have this idea, but where do I get the money? And I mean, there's money out there. If it's a good deal, there's money out there.
Yeah. And I don't want to diminish anyone's excuses.
Yeah.
We all have excuses.
I mean, I have excuses for myself. I mean, being self-aware and hearing what like your own roadblocks are too is good.
And the whole intention of this podcast is to transform the human mindset from scarcity and lack to abundance and wealth. Yeah. I'm a big believer fear kind of stops us from doing everything good that we want to do. Yep. That we don't transcend. If we don't transcend it and have the courage to take action in face of fear is really, what I call abundance. It's like trusting and having faith that it's going to work out, but you have to believe in it and you have to see it. And sometimes someone else guiding you and giving you information and pathways that you didn't know about can really help with that. So you lead a real estate investor group too? We do. Mm-hmm. And where does that meet?
So we meet once a month. We're actually taking off July and August. We're going to have a new location. So our location will be somewhere between Chester Springs and Pottstown. Start back up in September.
And what's the group called? How can people find out about it?
So
is it open to the public?
It is open to the public.
It's not a private secret group?
It's not a private
secret
group.
Society.
Our target and most of the people who come want to be in investing or are newer to investing is most of the people. We have some more experienced people as well. It's open to the public. It's Legacy Investment Group. We have a Facebook group that we just started. Most of what we've done has just been word of mouth. So we're trying to be a little more structured on that and put out some more marketing around it. But the whole premise is to come and network, right? So when we talk about people, like networking is really how I've grown. It's where I've gotten most of my business. Yeah,
real estate investor meetups have been the biggest game changer for me just because the different people.
Yeah, exactly. And the more people you meet, the more conversations you have, the more opportunity to either help someone, to find a deal, to find someone who it mirrors what your skill set is. So, I mean, that's really the whole purpose of our meetup. And we do, so it's an hour and a half to 2 hours. We spend an hour and a half networking and then usually 30, sometimes 45 minutes depending. And we bring in guests of all different kinds who are actively investing in real estate or providing the funding. The money one is always popular.
Yeah, it's not about the resources. It's about how resourceful you are. And if you come to one of these meetings, I'm sure you can tap into a lot of resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, most of what I started in investing, most of the education that I had was just listening to podcasts. And then as I started to get more and more into it, then I've paid to go to seminars, like have a coach and other things like that is more geared towards investing and not just business.
So to kind of recap everything, do you still do some real estate sales?
I do. Not a lot. It's not my primary focus, but absolutely, yes.
And then you have your investments, holds, flips, and then you have a property management company, or do you guys only self-manage?
So we only self-manage now. We had been doing it, but we've decided this year that we want to just focus on growing our portfolio and being able to help more people. So we've don't manage for other people at this time. Maybe in the future. But.
And then your husband has a construction company, correct?
Yes.
So this is all. It's nice to have it all in house.
We do, yes. So our construction team lets us move much quicker. So we have 4 full-time, like W-2 guys who show up every day, and then a great network of subs for.
And I've heard one of our agents is using you guys, and he's like, they're very fair and reasonable pricing, and
so
that's great.
We started that again, right? So you have a problem.
Yeah.
But
it's really hard to find someone that's even remotely reasonable and does good work. It's like
does good work, fair price, shows up when they say. And we were finding, because we were buying apartment buildings that had been like a lot of deferred maintenance, and finding anyone who wanted to come and renovate the apartments, which is, not a pretty bathroom or kitchen, like a flipper in your personal home. So that's how we originally started. And over the last year and a half, we've really grown. And our focus is like, we'll do renovations in anybody's house or anything, but our focus is really around helping the investors who have faced that hurdle of can't find the contractor.
Yeah, you don't want to put a
upsell me on
$40,000 kitchen in a rental.
Yep.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So we're doing a lot of turnovers for other landlords, and doing some flips for people as well.
And that's great because it's in the same wheelhouse for what you're doing for your rentals.
Yes.
And then you can probably say, look, this is a better material to use for rental grade, and it's going to last. And it's good to be able to bring some value that way. So Pottstown's your kind of main focus, 10-mile radius. If anyone's out there, how can they work with you potentially? What are the things that, people should reach out to Crystal for?
So I'm happy to help anyone who's not sure how to get started. I'm just one person with an opinion, but I can share like what we do for underwriting and what we do for budgets. But if you bring a deal, right? The deals are always finding a deal that's off market. That's a great.
They could learn while they earn, maybe.
Exactly. Yes. So, my first investment opportunity was from someone who gave me equity in order to help her turn a building. So being like, as we start to grow more, being able to shift that focus back and have partnerships that are just per deal, not necessarily for the whole, for multiple deals or anything, like you date the deal, is definitely a focus for this next year. So someone bringing a deal would be the best way.
That's awesome. Anything that any books, resources, courses that have been game changing for you, something you want to share to anyone listening out there in terms of getting into real estate investing or scaling or?
Yeah. I started 5 years ago learning about investing by listening to Bigger Pockets. And then I've gone to a couple of different seminars, and I'm part of a group called Investor Fuel. So their multifamily group is across the country. There's about 50 people in that group, and they meet once a quarter in person. That networking opportunity and those resources for doing some of the bigger deals has been really instrumental for me. And I met them through a seminar I paid to go to, like a 3-day investor crash course from start to finish, which was it was amazing.
So you definitely recommend investing in your real estate investor education.
Yes. No matter what you want to do, you should invest in yourself, in your education. Yeah. But you don't want to have like analysis paralysis where you just learn to learn. Like you have to take action. So anytime I pay to go somewhere, I always make sure before I leave, I have at least 3 action steps. And has to be done in the next 30 days. To
create some sort of return from your investment in the course. I've always done the same thing. I think that's a great idea. Any last words of wisdom?
Just take a step.
Take a step.
Do it, yes.
Jump in.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The water's safe.
Yes.
What happens if you sink?
It's a really good learning experience.
It's good to have some people around the pool that could pull you out,
Yes. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, like you go in with a plan, you should have a backup plan, and then maybe, a third, option C. But not every deal does go as planned, and that's okay. And you have to take it as a learning opportunity.
Have there been things that have happened in your real estate investing career that, at the beginning you would have thought that's impossible, would never be doing this?
Owning a single investment property. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, when I first started looking at real estate sales that turned into investing, like my income goals were so small, like the idea of owning an investment property was never on my radar. So if you're thinking that it's impossible, just double it because you can do it.
Yeah, it's amazing that, what we believe is possible for ourselves is so minuscule in terms of what the reality is of the possibilities. But you do have to surround yourself with the right people because who else is going to change your thought process? It's pretty hard to get outside yourself.
Yes.
And, being part of an investor group that Crystal runs, could be instrumental. So I highly recommend reaching out, get plugged in, And hopefully this conversation was helpful. Hopefully you took some sort of takeaway. If you did, write it down. Go take some steps. We didn't charge you for this, so you just have to have some sort of return and it'll be infinite.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.